Now, as we continue in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, if you watch the side note for the previous lesson, you would have gotten a little bit of insight into what he's doing here. Long story short, he is approaching the idea that wisdom and folly are like night and day. Wisdom is daylight. It's allowing you to see what's coming. Folly is just walking in blindness. And we know from elsewhere in the Bible that that's a pretty negative thing. But look what he does. He's saying in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, he's building on this case that wisdom, even though it will not save you from death, even though it will not give you everything you ever hoped for, it's still going to be the better way to live. Because again, it's going to allow you to see things and avoid the trouble that comes with them. And again, it's not going to avoid every bit of trouble. There's still going to be sorrow. However, wisdom is going to help mediate a lot of the sorrow that you would just blindly stumble into. So look at verse 13. He says, I saw that wisdom excelleth folly as far as light excelleth darkness. And then in verse 14, you can see the side note for an explanation of this verse. The wise man's eyes are in his head, which means he's seeing what he's looking at and able to make some decisions. But a fool walks in darkness, and I myself perceive that one event happeneth to them all. And this is where Solomon's going to start getting into this idea of death. Death is coming. Wise men die. Foolish men die. But again, wise men tend to avoid some of the dumber ways to die. And again, he's saying here, verse 15, as I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, so it happens to me. Why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this is also vanity. And so again, what he's doing is he's taking it to the major extreme of saying, yeah, okay, so I live longer, but I'm still going to die eventually, so what's the point? Why am I being wise? Like, I know wisdom's better. I know wisdom's so much better than folly, but what is the point? And then verse 16, he kind of sinks into some more of this depression here. And so, again, 2:16 is going to repeat what he said in verses 1:11. Verse 1:11, there is no remembrance of the former things. So all these things that happened beforehand, they're gone now. Verse 16 of chapter 2, there is no remembrance of the wise more than the fool. They both die and they both get buried and they're vanished. And he says, seeing how that which now is in the days to come shall be forgotten, how dieth the wise man? Like the fool. Their heart gives out. They get run over by a cart. They get squished by a horse. A tree branch fall. Whatever. You're both going to die. And that's ultimately where he's going with this logic. But look what he says. He says, therefore I hated life. And so he, earlier in this point, was making the case that he enjoyed his work. He enjoyed life. But he's getting to the point now where he's digging in going, I'm now just frustrated by it. All this work. What's the point? What's the point of it? And he says, therefore I hated life, because all the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. All is hevel, all is vapor, and chasing after the wind. All right? Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it to another man who shall come after me. And so he's saying, I am doing all this work. I'm bereaving my soul of all this good, and someone else is going to take it. Now, I think it's important to note, Solomon is just taking us to the extreme case. Obviously, Solomon's going to enjoy his life. Obviously, Solomon's going to enjoy the stuff he earned. So there's a point to it. But he's trying to stripping all that back and going, ultimately, though, if all I'm living for is stuff, I have all the stuff, man, it would have been really nice to be the next guy who didn't have to work for it all. Again, that's just kind of his reasoning through here. He says, and who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? He shall have rule over all my labor which I have labored, and wherein I have shown myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. And so again, he's dealing with this struggle, and again that frustration builds to a breaking point, and everything becomes toilsome to him. And again, he's hearkening back to Ecclesiastes 1 verse 3, what profiteth a man of all his labor which he does under the sun? Ultimately, there is none. Ultimately, there is no extreme pleasure. We'll finish these verses and then we'll expound on it. He says, who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet he shall have rule over all my labor, wherein I have labored. Wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity. Yet to the man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This is also vanity and vexation and a great evil. For what hath man of all his labor? and all the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun. For all his days are sorrow, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. So again, what we've got here with Solomon is he is just unpacking this idea and going, what's the point? Like, what profit do I have in all of this labor, in all of this work, in all of this toil, in all of this trouble? Ultimately, I'm just going to pass it on to the next guy, and he's going to live with everything that I've earned. This frustrates me. Why is this the case? Now again, he's losing track of eternal things. He's losing track of the fact that God has dispensed to man to live a certain way. He's being very real. And I think if you've ever had a job that you've sat in and gone, why on earth am I giving up all of my life to serve this guy over? What's the point? All of it goes away. And that's where Solomon is getting here. Again, I think there's a lot of important things to be noted. We'll cover a few more of them in the next lesson. But again, Solomon is unpacking really the big question of why. Why am I doing this? Why am I living for this way? And again, as we come back, we will dig into his conclusions at the end of chapter 2.